Okay, we are going to get started. I know your time is precious. It's during the workday, so I really appreciate you taking the time. As I said, my name is Caroline. I am the Vice President of the Yass Prize, and I am thrilled to welcome you all here today to our final webinar. This is the third webinar of a three-part series. The first webinar was all about what is a STOP award and those 4 STOP principles, which are so important to our organization. The second webinar was about the accelerator, which we're going to also touch on today. And then today is the power of the Yass Prize for both applicants and awardees. For those who were not able to attend the first 2 webinars, we have recordings. So in my follow-up email to you all today or tomorrow, I will make sure I include the recordings for all 3 webinars, so you can always go back and watch on your own time. So we're going to jump in. I have a lot of special guests with us here today. I'm going to do a little bit of sharing, as well as I'm excited to interview some of our important VIPs today. So let's get started. Here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. In a little bit, you're going to hear from Jeannie Allen, who is the founder and CEO of the Center for Education Reform. She's going to share her excitement about the Yass Prize this year, what is new and what you have to look forward to as both an applicant and a potential awardee. We're going to go over the history. And then today, the focus is really to dive in about what is in it for you for an applicant. What do you get from joining our community? And there's 3 key things that I'm going to talk about. And then if you become an awardee, what does that experience transform into? I'll talk about the funding timeline, and then we'll get to our 3 VIPs, Patricia Brantley, Joni Bessler, and Rob Blevins, who are here with us today. 2 of our semifinalists from last year and our $1 million Yass Prize awardee. And then at the end, I'll leave time for question and answer. Today, I'm going to be using the Q&A feature on Zoom. So not the chat, but the Q&A feature. So as you think of questions, if you want to put them in the Q&A, I'll be looking at those questions at the end. And we'll be wrapping up today at about 2:45. So let's jump in. Last year, at about this time, the Yass Prize was started, and it was started and is the brainchild of a longtime benefactor of the Center for Education Reform, Jeff and Jeannie Yass. And they wanted to figure out a way to honor and reward and advance the work of education providers who were doing fantastic work for kids during COVID. And we know that education was completely disrupted. Yet we also know that there were pockets of greatness throughout our entire country where kids were rising to the occasion because teachers and leaders were rising to the occasion and showing up for kids in a way that was so remarkable. So last year, we awarded over $3.5 million to the 20 education providers that we felt best exuded our 4 STOP principles. And I'm going to talk about those in one minute. I've been getting a lot of questions recently about the difference between the Yass Prize and the STOP Awards. So the Yass Prize is the top dog, the $1 million best of education provider that we feel best exudes the 4 STOP principles. And then alongside the Yass Prize, we have the 63 STOP Awards. And so the $1 million Yass Prize is that Oscar, but the 63 STOP Awards are just as exciting because they go to education providers who are still sustainable, transformational, outstanding, and permissionless. And there's 63 of you all that we're going to award. And that's a really exciting number considering the fact that we only honored 20 last year. So we're tripling our impact, and we're so excited to read your applications and read your stories. The minimum award for the 63 STOP Awards is $100,000. And as you get further through the competition this year, that prize goes up. So it goes from $100,000 to $200,000 to our 4 finalists will get $250,000. I alluded to our 4 STOP principles, which are sustainable, transformational, outstanding, and permissionless. We have one short answer question about each of these in your application. So I bet you're doing some research and really getting to know these attributes. As I mentioned, we did a whole webinar on these 4 attributes and dove really deep into them. So I'm not going to gloss over them today, but rather I would encourage, if you're confused or have some questions about one of these attributes, I'll send the webinar that you can watch. That was our first webinar. So to get more clarification and understanding about these 4 principles. So every single applicant who presses submit for their application this year has access to 3 really exciting benefits. Even if you don't become a quarterfinalist or a semifinalist, you still get invited and have access to our community, which is such a exciting announcement and change from last year. One of the first things that you'll be invited to, being just an applicant, not even an awardee, but an applicant, is our virtual accelerator. And this will happen the 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. And this is a time for you all, in addition to our awardees, to get access to the best of the best, not only in the field of education, but in the fields of finance, entrepreneurship, philanthropy, communications, marketing. We want to give you the top keynote speakers and really use this time to pause and stop and reflect about what is going well with your organization or your school, and where do you see yourself accelerating or going in the next year in 2023. So this is professional development, but not in the boring way that many people think of it, but this is the inspiration that you might have not realized that you needed. And so many of our semifinalists last year just spoke so highly of this experience. The fact that the Yass Prize not only gives you funding to fuel you forward, but also a critical time and a critical juncture point to have conversations about really important topics, not only coming from the field of education, but so many other fields that we can apply those principles to the work that we're doing. And I know that Pat and Joni and Rob will, I'm sure, further illuminate this point, but every applicant, as long as you press submit, will be invited to the 3-week virtual accelerator, which will all happen on Zoom. And there will probably be about 2 different sessions for each of those 3 weeks. So about like 6 to 8 sessions total. And again, the best of the best speakers. We're really excited about it. The second applicant benefit that you will all have access to will be an exclusive invite-only Slack channel. Many of your organizations may use Slack. For those who are not familiar with it, it is a portal for people in the virtual world to have communication with each other, to break down those silos. So instead of you just talking with the people in your organization or in your school, this allows you to introduce yourself and get exposure and have conversations with other people who are approaching similar kind of issues in education, but maybe they're from a different state, or maybe they're from a different sector of education. And so we're going to have different channels where people are, going to have the opportunity to introduce themselves, share articles, resources, opportunities. So think of it's not as maybe laborious as like email, but it's like a text message within your closest kind of group of friends. And the purpose of this is to build your network, to build your community of like-minded individuals who want to better themselves and want to learn from others around them. So this is the second benefit for all applicants. And the third benefit that all applicants will have access to is our December in-person Yass Prize celebration and conference in New York City. We will all convene at the Forbes headquarters at Forbes on 5th in December, where we will crown the $1 million Yass Prize winner, as well as reveal those other 4 finalists. And we want this to be a celebration, as well as, more learning and more networking for our community. And remember that we're defining our community as both our applicants and our awardees. So just by applying, you are getting access to these exciting opportunities and events. So while December seems really far away, we are halfway through this year, and we're really excited to see many of you in New York City at the end of the year. So those three benefits are, you will have access to them just by pressing submit. If you finish the process, meaning if you submit your application by the deadline, you are able to get those three things. So we are really excited, to broaden the reach that we have and to make sure our awardees are benefiting from these experiences, but also others that might not get to that phase. Now I want to dive into what our awardees, what that experience is like. By being an awardee and by being one of our 32 semifinalists, you will not only receive a minimum of $200,000 from the Yass Prize and the Stop Awards, but you'll also be invited to our InPerson Accelerator. And this builds on the virtual accelerator. It culminates, so it'll be the week following Thanksgiving break. And this is an opportunity to bring everyone together, have those water cooler, networking experiences where you're having keynotes and continuing that learning, but also being able to have those conversations with other speakers and with each other in the in-person experience. And again, we're bringing together speakers from all fields, not just the education field, and really thinking about how can I apply those concepts and those learnings and those best practices to the work that I'm doing. And so while it is called an accelerator to propel you forward, it's also a time to stop your normal day-to-day and to really reflect and think through where you're headed next. And now for our big announcement. Last year we were in Dallas and we were so lucky to have an awesome experience. But this year we are going to be in a different city. This is a city actually where two of our semifinalists, one semifinalist and one finalist are based. It's still a warm location. And so without further ado, our accelerator this year in November will be in Miami, Florida. So we're really excited. Academica is based there, as well as Care Elementary with Christopher Simmons leading that school. And so we are going to have access, and it's just going to be a fantastic week of learning, of networking, of connecting in the beautiful state of Florida. So we're excited. There's also will be some field trip opportunities. Last year we went to Edmentum, we went to the Perot Museum, and we went to the Bush Presidential Library and had more speakers there. And so while we are not in Dallas this year, we are still in a city where there's lots of innovation, lots of exciting opportunities. And so we're excited to have both the sessions as well as field trips in our in-person accelerator. In addition to the accelerator experience, all of our awardees, all 64, will have access to webinars and events and networking opportunities, have access to possibly writing as part of our Forbes contributor page, since Forbes is our media partner, have access to promotional efforts. We all love to share the stories and the new initiatives that you all are doing this year and beyond. Our CEO, who you'll hear from soon, also has a podcast. So being a guest on the podcast, and it was really cool to see some of the synergies that came on about last year and in those conversations, as well as our awardees have access to select alumni grant opportunities. So those are new grants that would be for those people who have already won from us. And those are to continue to scale and be able to benefit even more, children that you're working for. And so more to come on that if you do become an awardee with our group. So some key application dates for this year. We know that in late September, we are going to be announcing our 64 quarterfinalists. And then from there, we will cut the group in half to our 32 semifinalists. As I said, the semifinalists will be the ones going to the accelerator. And then we'll end the year by announcing our 5 finalists. And then, as I mentioned, all applicants whether you become an awardee or not, will have access to our finalist celebration in New York City at Forbes on 5th, and that will happen in mid-December. So December and beyond, when you enter into our community, whether you're an applicant or an awardee, our conversations and our connection with you doesn't stop in December at our celebration. But there'll be an opportunity to participate in future webinars and events as panelists. As you'll see, Pat, Joni, and Rob are participating today. Help with supporting the judging for next year's competition, which is an exciting opportunity to lend all that you've learned and your expertise in education to select future winners, as well as social media promotion and spotlight opportunities. And on my office hours today, a couple of people were asking about like grant follow-ups and grant write-ups. We call ourselves the Yass Prize because we want to reward past work. And we want to reward the amazing things that you're doing for students all around our country. And to that end, we don't require grant write-up or like a grant proposal following receiving the funding. So a couple of people have asked about that, and I just wanted to clarify. So before I get to our three semifinalists who are taking time out of their day, I wanted to introduce Jeannie Allen, who is excited to share her thoughts and her vision for all that's changed since last year. So much has changed, and the exciting opportunities for both applicants and awardees. So I will kick it off to Jeannie. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you, Caroline, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so exciting to see so many people participating in this webinar and engaged and interested in what's happening. Thank you for taking the time, if you have already, to start your application. I know it goes without saying, as Caroline has already said, and you're about to hear, we want you to finish your application. The more people that are in the pool, frankly, the better it is for everyone, and not just because of the opportunities you just heard. So Caroline just alluded to our experience with starting this kind of from the ground up last year, when we were sort of invited to think really boldly about how we would reward a provider who did amazing things under COVID, who was the best. And what they did, like all the folks out there, like many of you who just kept working no matter what was happening around you to serve students, was just incredible. And after that, it grew. It was kind of a surprise to us and many of my colleagues on the phone. The finalists will explain this to you, but at the Accelerator and Incubator, Jeanine and Jeff Yass were so excited by the motivation, the quality of the innovations that were happening, that they just felt like they had to reward everyone. And so sort of the expansion of the STOP Awards into the Yass Prize was born. And they said it was the best thing they'd ever done with their philanthropy. And we were just so honored to be able to manage it for them. And so what you're looking at now is a growing, robust effort to not just identify the organizations that truly are working to advance sustainable, transformational, outstanding permissionless education, so that we can honor you in a diverse cadre of you across the country. While there might only be 64, quote unquote, which is a lot more than last year, the reality is that all of you who apply are in this community, and that community, as Caroline and you know from emails and stuff, is not only to sort of be able to participate, but then we know about you. I mean, we get calls from the media and we look through the groups of people who have applied or that we've learned about. What was so exciting after being in this for almost 3 decades is that the vast majority of people who applied last year, I'd never heard of. It was so great. It was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was a Discovery Center in Springfield, Missouri. I didn't know there was a global living effort in South Carolina. I mean, so many people who do not show up and don't have the luxury of showing up at all the conferences and going to all these things that otherwise we'd run into you, we're in this. And so we use you and we look at you and we talk about you, and we want to be in a position to support you in a myriad of ways in the future. So please keep going, complete, encourage each other. It truly is. I'm not taking anything away from anyone else who does great work out there, but it definitely was the most rewarding effort of my entire professional career. So I'm so glad you are all still part of it. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you all for doing such great work that you're doing out there, and look forward to hopefully connecting with all of you in the future.
Awesome. And do you have any last advice? I know a lot of people are, at the tail end of submitting their application. What from last year's applications, like what are some of the stories that most spoke to you, or what advice do you have for as they continue to write?
Great question. We want it to be organic. Don't give us proposals that you've written for 1,000 other people where you have to check off boxes and show all sorts of cookie cutter metrics. We can learn from you if you tell us honestly what it is you feel, what you're doing. And yes, outcomes, of course, matter. Whatever your outcomes are, however you measure yourself, we want to hear about it. But knowing that you're the only one in a 50-mile radius in rural X that does this, knowing that you took students from this level to that level, knowing that you, to the point of permissionless, challenged your superintendent or said no to your leader. We want to reward and support and award people who are defying convention, right? And who literally are stopping for education and who believe deeply. And I will emphasize this, and I think a lot of you know this, and if you don't, I'm just going to emphasize it. The sustainability piece, it means you're not just saying, I want to run my effort, my school, my program, my ed tech, whatever. Now, I want it to be sustainable for more students in the future. And I'm going to actually put my money where my mouth is and fight to make sure every child has that opportunity. Money follows kids. If money doesn't follow kids, you should just look at us as sort of to accelerate you and start you up. But our philanthropy is actually intended to die after you've gotten this award, so that you actually can get the funds from public sources, even if it's not immediately, to keep going. So tell us how you're doing that. If you're running up to Phoenix or Greenville or whatever capital every couple of months to try to raise the flag to make your programs better, tell us that. So tell us your stories. Obviously be brief. You have to anyway, or you'll get kicked out of the system. But really tell us more about you and your group and why this is so important. But don't be so touchy-feely that we don't really understand how you're impacting kids.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeannie, for hopping on and for speaking to our potential applicants. I'm now going to invite Pat and Joni and Rob to come off video. I am so excited to have our two semifinalists here today, as well as our $1 million Yass Prize winner last year. I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions just so that you can pick their brains and hear their greatness. So I'm going to start with you, Joni. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Absolutely. And a warm welcome to everybody. I've been watching the numbers creep up over the last, yes, hi, Rob, hi, Pat. Watching the numbers creep up over the last 15 minutes. And I'm just really excited about the enthusiasm around this award. It is fabulous, and I know we'll get into it. Anyway, I'm Joni Bessler. I am a co-founder of an organization called Full Steam Forward, based here in New York City. We are a free after-school enrichment program in the STEAM world. And I say STEAM deliberately. So it's not just STEM, it's STEM plus A for arts. So an after-school STEAM program for elementary level girls of color. And we'll get into it, I think, later, but we were the baby of the 20 semifinalists. We actually started during COVID. So that's a story unto itself.
Wonderful. I'm excited to jump in more. Next up, Pat, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Pat Brantley. I'm the CEO of Friendship Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. We have 5,000 students, mostly brick and mortar, but about 700 that are full-time virtual. Our students are from 3 years old to 12th grade. And I guess we are the old group of the awardees. We are 25 years old this year. And so excited. We kept our schools open as much as possible during COVID. We started micro schools. We brought kids back, and being part of the STOP Awards, now what we're calling the Yass Prize, really helped us to think about the future that we wanted for all children in terms of the education we're providing. So that's who we are.
Fantastic. And I do get that question a lot. Like, do you want a scrappy startup, or do you want an organization that has been in existence for many, many years or decades? And the answer is, like, that is not a disqualifier. Like, all of those are great options, and we welcome any organization at any level that they've been in existence. So thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, Rob, Discovery Center of Springfield was our $1 million Yass Prize winner last year. Can you introduce yourself, tell us where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, thank you. It's so great to be among friends again. And that's part of the experience that I definitely want to highlight is now I gained a lot of friends through this whole process and a lot of experts that we can reach out to. So more to come on that. But the Discovery Center is in Springfield, Missouri. We are a 60,000 square foot science center. That's what we did before the pandemic. We served over 30 counties in Missouri, 4 states through field trips, over 30 states and 3 countries through our virtual learning. But when the pandemic happened, we actually turned our science center into emergency childcare and then quickly started adding much needed educational components to that. Through that, we birthed the Discovery School, which started out with 20 students in it. And then it went to 60, and then it went to 90. And we are actually going to, because of the generous support of the Yass family and the Center for Education Reform, we're going to be topping 100 students. So extremely rapid growth. And we do all that through a STEM-based, project-based, individualized learning standards program here at the Discovery Center. So that's just some of what we do, and it's a mouthful, but happy to be here today.
Wonderful. I'm going to jump right over to Pat. You know, I know you attend a lot of education conferences, and I talked a little bit about the Accelerator. What makes the Accelerator through the Yass Prize different than other conferences that people have probably been to?
Well, first, if you're in education or working with students over the past couple of years, you have just been hitting it hard, trying to make sure you're delivering in the best way possible, but not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring. And so the Accelerator provided us with this chance to step back and really think about what it meant to be sustainable. Like, you know, we're just trying to get food on the table of families that lost a place at school where they were getting most of their meals, or lost their connections to teachers, and we're trying to get technology out there. But the Accelerator gave us this opportunity to step back and say, listen, what really is the organization and the structure? How do we continue this work? How do we make sure that the kind of things that we're doing for, you know, one group of students transcends across? How do we actually transform education? That was really powerful to have that time to do so. And we weren't doing it on our own. If you work in schools, as I do, it can become an echo chamber. We had some of the best business people in the country, possibly in the world, coming and saying to us, here's what you need to think about as you think about expansion. And then it was the power of the network, right? I might talk to people in DC, I might talk to other charter schools. Occasionally, if it's around subject matters, I might talk to district schools. I don't get to talk to the Rob Blevins of the world or the Joni Besslers. I don't get to talk to people about how we bring more science, more STEAM to girls of color. I don't get to talk about our partnerships with museums. That's what Yass Prize, the STOP Award, did for us, was to connect us.
Fantastic. And I'm going to talk about those collaborations because I know, Pat, you and Friendship have benefited so much. And it's really that spider web, right? Like, you are connected to charter schools and other leaders in DC or elsewhere. But now your spider web is just like really like true connections, not just an email exchange or a LinkedIn, but like you had long conversations with people that have now changed some of the initiatives that you're doing at Friendship. So more to come there. Jumping over to Joni, what was something that you learned at the accelerator or a conversation that you had that still sticks with you today?
Yeah, I can give you a fabulous example because it not only sticks with me, we created a whole new program because of it. We had a discussion at some point during the accelerator about the importance of family engagement and family involvement and how best to reach the families of our learners. And the light bulb kind of went on for me that while we were legitimately trying very hard, we were missing the boat. And while the parents, when I pick up the phone and call them, they're very excited about the program, I didn't feel that it was a two-way interconnected relationship. So shortly after the accelerator program, we actually created a new position at Full Steam Forward, the head of family engagement. We have hired an educator who is bilingual, because that was another challenge we were running into, is not everybody does speak English, to fill that role. And we are building a very explicit family involvement and family engagement program. And I actually doubt that would have happened, at least in the time frame it did, had it not been for the time that we spent together as a group.
That's fantastic. And I think you're referencing Janelle Wood and Colleen Dipple, two of the experts kind of in the parent engagement world.
Yeah.
And really thinking about, even if you feel like you're doing right by parents and you're meeting families where they are, there's still room to grow. And that's fantastic that you even added an additional staff member to leverage.
As well as, Carolyn, the discussion with Oakland Reach. I don't know if she's been represented on the screen, but that was an eye-opener for me, because that organization is very much about involvement of parents. And I listened to her and I thought, whoa, we've got a lot of work to do here.
And Joni's referencing Lakeisha Young from Oakland Reach. She was actually on our first webinar. So if you want to hear more from her, when I send the recordings afterwards, you can look at the first webinar. And she spoke so beautifully about all the work that they're doing at Oakland Reach. Headed over to you, Rob. What was your favorite moment or your favorite speaker during the accelerator, whether it was virtual or the in-person accelerator?
Oh gosh, that's a really tough question. Honestly, Jeannie's on the call, so you're going to hear from her a lot, but I learned probably the most from Jeannie and her passion and her experiences and stories, because we went through a lot of the stuff that I think she went through with, getting yelled at by superintendents. And that was one thing I really needed to hear. It's hard when we're a small nonprofit. We may have 60,000 square feet, but our annual operating budget is only about 1.6 million. And that's after adding the school. And to have these superintendents yelling at you about doing these things where you just want to help kids was really dehumanizing, frustrating, and quite frankly, the type of thing that made you want to quit. And then hearing her passion and her stories and the fights that she's carried with this really just inspired me to want to do that 10x scale thing and change even more lives, not retreat, but run forward. And so that's probably the most important person that I met through this whole experience.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing. Joni, how did you specifically use the Yass Prize funding, right? You received money, and we're talking about the accelerator and those non-tangible benefits, but how did you specifically use the money to broaden the work that you're doing in New York and beyond?
Right. So I mentioned at the onset that we are the baby of the group. We're probably still the baby of the group. We had just launched when we filled out the application. We had 86 girls. So our primary objective was and still is growth. The program has proven to be spectacular, frankly, well beyond our greatest hopes. And our goal now is just to reach more girls. We're an online program, so the good news is $100,000 was life-changing for us. It went a long way because it only costs us, about $1,000 per girl per year to enroll in the program. So we have used the money, and we are using the money. We still have a little bit left, but don't tell Jeannie, specifically to scale and to grow. The other thing I would mention is not only are we trying to go broader, but we are trying to go deeper. Our educators believe 3rd and 4th grade alone is not enough, and they believe we should be doing 2nd through 5th grade. So we're also deepening the program, and we are using the money for curriculum development.
And over to you, Pat. You talk about the Yass Prize family and this alumni community. Can you describe the community to you, or what it means to you in your own words, and talk a little bit about some of the collaborations that you've had with other alumni?
Sure, absolutely. So we are collaborating with one of the alumni called Stimuli to build a multiverse for students where they will have their own avatars and have learning pathways designed for them. And they will be working in the way that many people do work now, artificial intelligence, being driven, but still connected to their teachers. It is really so exciting. I'd love to describe it better, but I didn't grow up in the metaverse. But that said, every student that I've talked to, this idea that they will be able to see themselves and actually working, going to museums virtually, participating in artificial intelligence, it's going to be a game changer for us, and it's going to be great for our students, but it will also be available to the world. With another provider, Rock by Rock, which during the pandemic created lesson plans and home project-based learning kits for students. They are working with us, and we are going to take those kits and develop them for students as young as 3 years old. They'll be connected to the curriculum in our schools. And that means it doesn't matter if you're in school or at home, you'll be able to do these projects, which is terrific. And Carolyn, can I just say one thing? When we all got together and were selected last year, we didn't actually know there was a monetary prize. So when we talk about the accelerator and the time that we spent together in Dallas, hearing from each other and presenting what we were doing, we were getting so much out of that without even knowing there was a monetary prize. And so what has happened with the Yass Prize and with the STOP Awards, like giving 3-4 times as much money out is like, I don't know, it's the cherry on top of the cake that was already there. And I just wanted to mention that level of generosity is a generosity of spirit that we felt throughout this entire process and continues today.
And what Pat is mentioning, and what I didn't reference earlier, are the pitches. The InPerson Accelerator culminates with a pitch presentation, a 3-minute presentation from each of the semifinalists, where they lay everything out there of why they should win the $1 million, but also where they're going, like what they're doing. And I think it was a beautiful opportunity for all of the conversations that have been had to kind of come to a forefront, to be able to share your story and share what you're doing in DC or New York or Missouri, and to hear from one another. So to that, Rob, the application deadline is coming up. Why should current applicants press submit?
Well, I think we've already talked about how there is an incredible amount of generous funding that's out there. And so, I mean, your odds this year at getting a significant amount of support for the incredible things that you're doing is really high. So I think you all have a better chance than we did. So it's it's definitely worth your time. If you are able to access, if you hit submit, it sounds like you're going to be able to virtually be part of this accelerator. That's a good enough reason right now, but not to do the Billy Mays. But wait, there's more. If you become a semifinalist and get to go in person to now Miami, these things that they're saying, that Pat and Joni are saying about that accelerator, they are 100% true. That was a huge growth portion for us. We brought 3 people with us to Dallas, and every one of us came away with something different: new connections, new perspectives, new energy, new funding. We found that out too. So there's that, but you should just hit submit, because you have a chance at this thing see how much it's just grown in this past year. Imagine what it can do for your organization, and hit submit for the kids that you serve, because you're going to be able to do more for them. So, it'd be really silly not to even start on this thing and to not finish it. Do not just leave it incomplete. Type something in. I think the biggest risk that we face as a society right now is not taking risks. And what a small risk to reward benefit that you have here.
Awesome. Joni, any last piece of advice for the hundreds of people who are on this webinar right now that want to learn more from you all?
Well, I would just like to echo what Rob said and kind of share my story. So when this came out, we spend all our time writing grants. It's just nonstop. And when this came out, my team said, this has come in, Joni, but I don't think we should apply. We're never going to win. And I said, you're probably right. We'll never win, but maybe we'll get some recognition. Maybe we'll get a little publicity. Maybe we'll meet some interesting people. Maybe there'll be some breadcrumbs that we can pick up, because we would be happy with $10,000. And so we did it. We submitted it. And, nobody was more shocked than us that we made the top 20. And what I would say to all of you on this call is the group is looking for a diversity of educators, not just a charter school, or not just an after-school program, or not just this or not just that. And I was struck by the diversity of the top 20 and what we represented. And the one thing that we all shared was a commitment to educational equality in however we chose to do it. So what I would say to all of you, and Rob said it very well, which is, don't be silly, hit submit. You don't know. You can't see the other 164 applications, and the benefits this year are fabulous, regardless of whether you're in the top 20. So that's what I would say. And whether you're young or old, whether you're an educator, whether you're a service organization, go for it.
Awesome. And before I get to the Q&A, I'm going to go to Pat for one last remark, but please remember that if you have any questions, we are going to have a couple of minutes at the end to answer, and I will be looking at the Q&A feature on the Zoom. So not the chat, although I'm love that the chat is very active, but please ask any of your questions that you may have in the Q&A. Pat, any final words? You always close it out so beautifully.
I'll close it out with this. There was a moment before we had our pitches, and I was sitting on the side in this room with 20 educational entrepreneurs about to give their speeches. And I had this real moment of clarity and just pride. I imagine that it's sort of like how kids feel before they walk across the graduation stage. We had achieved something, and the STOP Award gave us a chance to really reflect on what that was. Without the STOP Award for friendship, we probably wouldn't have continued our micro schools. We wouldn't have continued our work for students who are medically fragile in DC, and we're the only provider of services to them for both online and in person, because we wouldn't have had the chance to really think about what are we offering and how do we go farther. And so it's an easy thing to hit submit, right? Do it and you will be rewarded, because you're going to get access to the virtual convening regardless. And if you make it even further, you're going to get money to help your ideas really fly. So hit submit and join our community, because we're waiting for you.
Wonderful. I couldn't have said it better myself. I might be asking you some questions that applicants have, so stay tuned for a couple more minutes, Joni, Pat, and Rob. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you for taking the time. It's always great to see you all and to hear your stories yet again. So thank you so much. I'm going to jump right into the questions. We have about a couple minutes, and we'll end around 2:50. A couple of people have asked, Jenny and Haley and Lisa have asked about the recordings. If you signed up for today's webinar, I will be sending all of the recordings, including today's, out in an email tomorrow. So please be on the lookout for that. Amber asked, if we are not selected as a recipient this year, can we apply again next year? Yes, the answer is yes to that. And if you applied last year and are applying again this year, there's a question that says, did you apply last year? So make sure you press yes. Again, we are tripling the amount of people that we are recognizing this year. So as Rob said, the chances are even greater. Cynthia asked, do you give more favorable favorably to a technology-based impact solution. Pat, do you want to take a stab at that one? Do you give more, I mean, what it was your sense on on technology and how that came about in the semifinalists from last year?
Absolutely, I would say no. I don't think that there is more favor to a technology. We do have an online school, but in our award, it was about the kids we were bringing together in person. And while we're leveraging the online to do that, the real focus was on how are we serving kids that might be the furthest from opportunity, and what they needed was in-person school.
And Rob, so many people ask, we're not a school, or, we're not educating students like, during those traditional school hours. What would you say to like whether they're eligible, or those stories, kind of like yourself, where you weren't a school, but then you became a school? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think that so many times you look at things, and the Yass Prize and the Stop Awards and the Center for Education Reform are all very centered on the why, like helping kids get to good educational outcomes. I think that is just so baked in that if you're doing that in some way, I think that's what they're looking for. They want to see people that hyper focus on kids and outcomes, and be damned with whatever else the world's trying to stop you. They don't like that you're doing it differently. You've gotten pushback for that, but yet you're still helping kids, like, because your why is so focused. I think that's what they're looking for, is congruency in caring about kids first above everything else. And so that may be an after school program. That could be, a science center that becomes a school. That could be a virtual learning program like Joni has with the STEM mentorships. There's just so many different organizations that I got to meet that were just, that's the one thing we had in common, was we just wanted to help kids. We want to make the world a better place through properly educating kids.
And you all were doing it so well, right? So you're not only, we know so many education providers out there, but you were the top tier in your state or in your region. So Joni, someone asked, Lindsay asked, is there any favor over larger nonprofits rather than smaller ones? I know you alluded to this earlier, but can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said. No, there doesn't seem to be any favor. And in fact, again, excuse me, I was struck by the diversity and the range when the 20 of us came together.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to do two last questions, and then I will explain how you can get your question answered if I did not get a chance to answer it. Someone asked about the photos. It is required that you upload some photos for our application, mostly to use to promote your all work if you become an awardee. And someone was asking, if I'm a virtual platform, how would I upload a photo of that? And the best way to upload photos is to get, what does that look like when that's in the hands of kids? So if kids are virtually, approaching your provider, and, showing us what that looks like. But Rock by Rock was a good example. They were one of our finalists from last year, and they are a project-based learning kit in a box, and they send this awesome curriculum to a lot of homeschool families. And so they showed us pictures of like what those kits look like, and what that website kind of looks like, what that platform looks like. So the more that you can illuminate your work and how that really directly connects to kids, that would be the best way to upload those photos. And the last question that I'm going to answer is how do I put evidence of outcomes on the application? And I would say that, the outcomes, as Jeannie alluded to, should be kind of throughout the application, but that outstanding question would be a great place to put those. When an investor comes to you, or if a parent comes to you and says, I want to send my son or daughter to school, what do you tell them? How do you showcase that outstanding piece? How are you different than the school down the block? And if you could put that evidence, whether it's qualitative evidence or quantitative, that does not matter to us. But what is your pitch for why someone should send their kid to school with you, or take part in your program or initiative? If I did not get a chance to answer your questions, please feel free to connect with us on our website, and that has a connect box where you can connect with us directly. I also have weekly office hours up until the application deadline, which are every Wednesday from 12 o'clock to 12:30. So you missed it today, but I'll be there next week, and every subsequent week leading up to the application deadline. And I will include that Zoom link in the email that I'm going to send. Once again, thank you, Joni. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Pat, for your time. For the future applicants, I know you'll probably get a chance to meet them, maybe in person or virtually again. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us here today. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your week and have an excellent long weekend. Thank you, everyone. Awesome. Thank you for being with us here today.